Welcome to the Podband Pipecast, the premier pipe band podcast.
Good job.
That was helpful.
That was great. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We have a kind of a pipe band celebrity on our podcast today. It's exciting. Local celebrity, at least. I don't know. I feel like you're a celebrity.
Thank you.
So would you like to introduce yourself? People, this is Kevin Conquest with the Mesa Caledonian Pipe Band and also of several other acclaims. Would you like to introduce yourself, what you do now in the pipe band world, where you're at?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Kaylee introduced me, I'm Kevin Conquest. I'm currently the drum major of Mesa Caledonian Pipe Band. I've been with the band since 1995. And I did take some time away from the band to play in grade 1. So I played with the Los Angeles Scots, the 78th Fraser Highlanders in Ontario, Canada, and then Dowco Triumph Street in Vancouver. Well, Dowco being the band from all around the world, but it was based out of Vancouver. And then also I had the pleasure of being one of the drum majors in the Piper's Trail at the Tattoo.
Awesome. Yeah. We will get to that. Don't worry. We figured that'd be something people would want to hear about. So we'll get to that. But first, so how did you get into the pipe band world to begin with?
Oh, what a question. It's one of those things where you try something and you're not quite sure how it's going to go, but you find out that you love it. And the rest is all history. I think a lot of people who join pipe band probably feel that way. Mm-hmm. I started off in high school marching bands in Southern California, and our high school had a British Guards theme. So we wore the red tunics and the bearskins. At one point, our high school had a pipe section and we had a pipe band. That was a popular thing that was in Southern California going back to about the 60s, early 1970s. There was a band director for Glendora High School named Mr. Norman, and he was the one that brought that concept of a British themed marching band to that region. And, as I mentioned Glendora High School, they competed all of our contests out here in the West, and they still have their pipe band going. But it was sort of a foray into that. And the president of the band boosters at my high school were Mr. and Mrs. McClintock, who have run the San Diego games for years. And they also run one of the family heritage tents that you can buy coats of arms and all that stuff at the games. And they suggested that I start looking at the Highland Games because I was really interested in drum majoring in high school. I was really interested in all of this, and I knew a little bit about my heritage, not a lot at that point in time. And they said, hey, come to the Highland Games. So I volunteered to run parking for the San Diego Highland Games.
That doesn't sound exciting.
No, it was not exciting at all, Adela. It was terrible. But it was an easy way to get into the games for free as a young kid in high school. And so I volunteered to do parking at the San Diego Highland Games, and that allowed me to look at the drum major contest, look at the pipes, and look at the pipe bands, look at the drumming. And I fell in love with it instantly, and I kind of knew at that point that was something I wanted to do, with a goal being after I graduated from high school, I wanted to at least compete as a drum major at Scottish Highland Games. Then I decided, hey, the bagpipes look really awesome. And it was one of those things where, you don't know anything about it. You really don't have access to a teacher or anything like that, especially in that time. In the 90s, the internet was not really what it was today or what it is today. And so I wound up buying like a really cheap bagpipe CD from like a bargain bin at Circuit City. This is how old I feel right now talking about these things that don't exist anymore.
Circuit City.
Yeah, it doesn't exist anymore. But I bought like a $2 bagpipe CD. I fell in love with it, and then I started looking for someone to teach me the pipes. I didn't get into it until we moved out here to Arizona in 1995. And that's where I came in contact with this band, and the rest is history.
Cool.
I want to circle back a little bit. So the high school that you went to and you were the drum major in, did you do traditional marching band drum majoring, or was it still bagpipe drum majoring?
It was a bit of both. That's an awesome question. So on the field, we did the field conducting, which is what you would normally associate with marching band drum majors. But for the street competitions, which is something that's kind of rare to that section of our country, nowhere else in the country do we really do street reviews. We still use the mace, and we did it exactly like what we would see in pipe bands. It was pretty cool.
Cool. So for those that want to see Kevin's props, subscribe for $5 on the Patreon, and you will be able to see the videos feed and also these wonderful things that you've brought. And we'll get into those as we continue with Kevin's sort of interview here. So when you wanted to join a pipe band, you said that you wanted to play pipes, or did you still want to be a drum major? How did you get into drum majoring?
I wanted to be in a pipe band, period. That's just
do
I
anything.
knew I had to do it. I wanted the kilt. I wanted to be in a pipe band. It was just something that spoke to me. And I think we all relate to that. It's just something inside you that you just want to do it. And so when I moved here to Arizona, I started looking for pipe bands, and I was with the Phoenix band for a short time. But they had just had a problem. They weren't really getting off the ground. They had low numbers and not a lot of availability. So I wound up finding out by happenstance that I lived in the same neighborhood as Jim Grant, who was our bass drummer for many years at Mesa.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those small world things. I couldn't believe I lived a block and a half away from him. And we started talking, and he said, "Why don't you come take a look at the band?" And I did. And started talking to Chris and Diane and another piper who was in the band at the time, Lynn Simmons. And, they got me going on Chandler lessons and everything else. So it was really good.
So, getting back to what you do now, I know you're a huge help with our ensemble and our just everything. People don't realize probably your role in our band as much as it is. Because if you say, you're a drum major, it also, you play all the instruments in the band as well. So it's hugely helpful. I want you to know to have you sometimes outside the circle, sometimes inside the circle, just listening, and you can relate to every instrument in the band. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't realize or don't think about. Mm-hmm. They're like, well, the pipe major can jump out of the band and listen for a while, or can, stand there and listen, or the drum sergeant can. But having someone who can do all of those things is really incredible. And it's cool to see, you talk about your history of, you just wanted to be in a pipe band, and now you can do everything in the pipe band.
It's been an interesting career for me, and it's also been a rare one. In a military fashion, which is where the history of a drum major comes from, the drum major is a drummer. And in the British military, they're able to write drum scores. They can play all the instruments in the drum corps. They can have that ear and listen. But in the non-military world, in the civilian pipe band world, we really do have two different types of drum majors. You have a type of drum major that is more focused on leading the bands, and then you have a drum major that's more focused on competing, flourishing, throwing the mace. So it is rare to have a drum major that knows how to play even just one of the instruments, but I've been very fortunate to play tenor, bass, snare, and pipes. And, thank you. That means a lot to me to hear that said. Thank you.
So which one do you think is the hardest? I'm sure they're all
pipes.
Pipes.
I didn't even need to think about that. Bagpipes were such an amazing instrument to learn about. I played saxophone in high school, and I thought going from a woodwind instrument to what you could consider a woodwind instrument would be very easy. Wow, I was wrong. It is so temperamental, and there are so many different things happening with that instrument that I certainly gained a respect for it quickly. It's not easy.
Which one is your favorite instrument? If you had a choice, let's say we're doing a gig tomorrow, and Chris says, "Hey, can you play something, anything, or do anything if you'd rather do drum majoring? What would you like to do?"
No, drum majoring's off the table.
Oh, okay, not drum majoring.
Unless that would be your choice.
Anything else.
No. So this one will shock you.
Yeah.
Right? You know that I played tenor for years, and that I did very well in band competition, solo competition, made it to grade 1, and made it to professional as a solo tenor drummer. But this is going to shock you. I would pick bass.
Really?
I would absolutely pick bass any day, including Sunday. And the reason for that is being in the center of the band, and some people would say it's because it's a solo show. It so isn't a solo show. The bass is such a pivotal instrument. Alex sitting over there on the computer, and he's phenomenal as a bass drummer in our band, and that's certainly his job. But if Alex was missing, I would volunteer to play bass in a heartbeat. It's just the heart of the band.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun. I've played bass a few times. Yeah. It's man, this is awesome.
Well, my chiropractor will love it too. Yeah. So I can get adjusted afterwards.
That's okay. They're not going to listen to this. So, going back to drum majoring, I know you talked a little bit about sort of the two different drum majors that we have in civilian bands. What really is the role of a drum major? What do drum majors do? Could you talk more about, if you're at a gig or something, what do you see a drum major doing?
Absolutely. So every band should have a drum major. And the reason I say that is it is a role that can take care of all the things that go on behind the scenes and the stuff that the other leaders of the band don't have time to do. So the role of a drum major, the 3 Ds of a drum major, drill, dress, and deportment, the drum major should be looking at the uniforms of the band, helping make sure that they're all worn properly, that everything looks clean, everything's worn, straight. The kilts are level, and when we compete in a drum major competition, we're even looking at the socks to make sure that the tops of the socks are level and that the flashes are at the same part of the leg and all that. We don't really quite go that deep in the band, but that's one area where we make sure that everybody's uniformed properly and has everything they need. As far as the drill is concerned, at a gig, looking at the space that we have to perform in and determining if we have a very long walk up to where we're going to stop, then we should probably play a longer tune like 3/4 because there's more music to play along the way and not have unnecessary repeats. If you play a short tune for a long parade, it's going to get repetitive quickly. But looking at the space that we have to determine what type of formation is going to look best. If we got to form a horseshoe, which this band does a lot of it, or gigs, determining how do we get into the horseshoe, what's the easiest way to do that, making sure that the band's not going to be cramped into something. Sometimes we get very small performance areas and we just decide not even to march in. We just walk in and play because otherwise you're going to be tripping over tables or chairs or something like that. But it's also sort of, I don't want to say like a manager, like every rock band has a manager. I don't want to say that, but it's the things that the pipe major shouldn't have to worry about. The drum sergeant shouldn't have to worry about it. When they're tuning pipes, when they're tuning drums, and they're getting everything organized for the show, the drum major is the one that can interface with the person that hired us to make sure that the timing's going right. On competition days, the drum major can be absolutely crucial in making sure that the band's where they're supposed to be along the way onto final tuning, find out if the competition's running behind. Those are just some of the things that a drum major can do and do very well.
Cool. What advice do you have for someone who would like to become a drum major? What kind of person do you have to be? What are the steps? Do you have to play an instrument?
So no, you don't have to play an instrument. There are a lot of drum majors, especially on the competitive side, who are excellent at throwing the mace and really solid marchers. They look great when they're competing, and they don't play a pipe or a drum at all. Or they may have come from the high school marching band world like me, where they play trombone or trumpet or marching percussion, but never bothered to play in a pipe band. But what I do recommend, number one step for anybody who wants to be a drum major in a pipe band, they got to know the music. You've got to know your band's tunes. And you've got to understand the basic structure of how the music flows and how it works. It really seems odd to have someone starting and stopping a band that wouldn't understand where that needs to happen. But that's my first step. My first advice is learn the music. You don't have to play in the circle, but you need to know it. And then from there, learn, obviously, the drill. There's a lot of different drill signals and different techniques that we use. And I say technique, it's so relaxed in pipe band marching, especially in the competitive pipe band. It's not like DCI. It's not like high school or college marching band, where there's some very different types of steps and techniques to lifting the knee when they're marking time and whatnot. But learn the drill commands and learn to understand how the pipe band starts, stops, how they move, and then the history, because this is really cool. And there's a lot of things that people who have been playing in pipe band for years don't know about that has a direct impact on what we do today.
So a lot of bands will be most familiar with drum majors based on what they see at a Highland Games, like they're lining up for mass bands and a senior drum major comes by and lines them up. And you've actually been the senior drum major for several Highland Games. Do you want to talk about what that role is like? Do you do more, or do you just show up for mass bands, line people up? That's kind of a loaded question.
So I realize that a lot of people think that the drum majors that lead mass bands just stand around and drink beer all day and wait for all of you to do your thing, and then you show up and then we just bark at you. And
some probably do, right?
So yes, we do have time for a quick refreshment before we go on. But being the senior drum major of a mass pipes and drums at a games, it really is a big job. That was something that I found to be my forte, something that I could do well. We had at the time several good drum majors in our region, and then today we have many that are amazing. I can't even start to name them because there's too many that are that good. But at the time that I really started getting involved in this, there weren't many drum majors, especially in Arizona, Colorado, Utah even, that had the ability to lead a mass band effectively, that had the musical skill, that had the marching skill, and the management skills, the understanding of how things flow together and work. I determined that that was something I wanted to try and do and learn as much as I could to be a really solid senior drum major. And that, I think I fell into that role over time. It's just something that naturally happened. So what's involved in that, it's a lot more than people see, especially from the pipe band side, to figure out what's going to go on with an opening ceremonies or closing ceremonies and put the mass bands into that. It's a lot of work with the Highland Games Committee, making sure that they understand that we shouldn't be a backdrop. You know, a lot of times, it doesn't happen much anymore, but there were a lot of times in the past where pipe bands would come onto the field and we'd stand there for an hour and a half while they gave out all kinds of prizes for other things and speeches. And there was a very good drum major here in our region, Jim Harrington. He put out a how-to on mass bands about 25 years ago. And one of the things that he put in there is that mass bands really shouldn't last longer than 20 minutes. And,
Amen.
Yes. Right, so, you know, a lot of us took that to heart. And, you know, I realized that some things can't be made 20 minutes. It's going to be longer than that, especially at big Highland games. But one thing that I took from being a senior drum major is that for the amount of time that the bands are on the field, we're going to play as much as possible of that time, with the exception of awards. When it comes time to issue the prizes for grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, grade 2, grade 1, that's different. It's about the bands. So it's okay to have the bands on the field for that. But it's a lot of work. Talking with the games committee to make sure we understand how much time we have in the arena, making sure that there's adequate room in the arena to bring the bands on and off. There's a big difference between, let's say, games like Costa Mesa, where you got a nice, solid, wide open gate that we can fit 10 across there with no problem, versus some of the games where they open one little section of chain link fence and you can't get 10 across through there. You can't even get 5 across through there. But it's also participating with the people who are responsible for the color guards. If we have military bands like 3rd Marine Air Wing plays at some of our games, we work with that band director and that drum major. It's coordinating the tunes that are going to be played. It's coordinating with the pipe majors of each band, getting in contact with them to find out how many players they have in each band. And it's like playing Tetris to figure out which waves you can put which bands into that won't make this band 3 times longer than this band. But also something that I do as a senior drum major, when I've got, let's say, 5 or 6 waves of bands coming out of the park, I try and mix up the grade levels so that we have at least one strong band, one strong upper grade band in each wave. And then we can mix it up because that holds it all together. Deciding who the lead drum corps is going to be, communicating that to them, picking a lead bass drummer. It's a lot of work. I realize I'm rambling, but it's a lot of work.
No, yeah, there's a lot that goes into it that I don't think people realize.
And you know, and then coordinating with the other drum majors who show up and making sure that we're all using the same drill signals, that we're all carrying the mace the same way. If we're going to salute for certain parts of the show, we need to determine when that's going to be and who's going to call out the signal to salute, or the command to salute, excuse me. And then who's going to give cutoffs, who's going to give those mace signals. So it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I would say for every Highland Games that I'm a senior drum major at, what the bands don't see is that I'm spending the month before that working on all of this.
So you mean you're not just chilling until 5 minutes before mass bands, drinking beer?
So it is a rare sighting that you will find me behind like a trailer or something at one of the Highland Games having a beer before we go on. But that's a rare sighting. I don't get that opportunity, especially if I'm judging drum majors on top of that. It's a very, very busy day.
Is there anything that kind of do's or don'ts of mass bands that people in pipe bands can do to
Or
look
don't.
sharp? Or don't.
Or don't do?
Can do or don't.
The one thing is as much as we don't like being on the field after a long, hot, sweaty day of competition, it is very important for the crowd. These people that pay to come to the Highland Games, every time we've had an exit survey at a Highland Games, the number one thing that comes up is the mass pipes and drums. Everybody loves that. That's what they want to see. You know, you'll see people come to a band competition and stand around on the sidelines and listen to it, but the crowd is 10,000 deep at mass band. You know, it's just a huge crowd. So things to do and not do: be on time. You know, if we know we're going to step off at 5 and we ask for the bands to show up around 4:30. 4:30, 4:40 is great, you know, but be on time. Don't show up at 4:59 expecting things to go well. You know, again, it's supposed to be fun. What we do is fun. You know, but be professional. Be the show that you would want to be. If you were paying money to see, your favorite band on stage at a concert, would you be happy if you paid money to go see them and they were goofing off the entire time or didn't even bother to play? Stuff like that. But just, put out the show that you would want to see, and things to do, enjoy it. That's all I can say. It's supposed to be fun.
Cool.
Okay. What has been your favorite or most memorable experience in the pipe band world, and why?
I think there's too many to pick one. I'm not copying any
Okay,
of that.
okay, you can pick two.
I can pick two? All right, cool. All right. Wow. I think I'll pick a competitive moment and then a non-competitive moment. Competitive moment, I would have to say, is the first time I made a World's Final at the World Championships. As a drum major, that was something that I was hammering myself over and over every summer to do. And at that time, there had only been one other person from outside the UK ever who had made the adult drum major final at the Worlds, and I was the next one. And I was also the first one to crack the top 3. So I think competitively, there's nothing that beats that. Now, that was 15 years ago. It was a long time ago, and things have certainly changed, and we have a lot of folks from outside the UK that have done really well. But that was something that was special to me. Non-competitive moment, I know we're going to talk about it on another episode, but this summer, having the opportunity to be in the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo, there's just nothing like it. Yeah, we'll talk about that on.
Yeah, we do have the next episode is going to be, we're going to still have Kevin here. We're going to talk about marching and his experience at the tattoo and what he learned from that and some of that. Before we go, though, you brought a lot of props here.
Yeah,
do you want to talk about so people once again who are watching the video can see we have this beautiful short stick here. It's a mace, but it's a little baby mace.
Right.
And then we have some other larger maces, bigger sticks that I wonder if you'd like to talk about the differences. And you've had some people make comments, I know, about the little mace we have here. Like,
right.
Oh, where's the rest of it?
I shrank it in the dryer.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, we'll talk about some of the props. Adele, if you could grab the all brass one.
This back one?
Yeah, the back one there. That'd be great.
Do you need my help?
I don't want to break any of them.
Technical difficulties.
Yeah. So I'll try not to bang the microphones, but for those of you who are watching at home on our video, this is a very typical ceremonial mace for a drum major. The reason it's called a mace, the proper name for it is a staff. But the reason it's called a mace is if you look at like the medieval weapon that would be called a mace, it's a ball and a chain. But if you look, it's got the ball and it's got a chain. So there's some folklore in drum majoring that the drum major staff developed from that. And that's why we still see chains on ceremonial maces to this day. But a standard mace for ceremonial purposes would be about 5 feet in length. And it's got the head that's usually a ball or a trumpet shape, and it's surmounted with a crown. In the UK, in the United States, thank you. In the United States, it'd be surmounted with an eagle. And those are a symbol of a national device. You'll also see custom maces that are donated to Highland regiments that have different types of tops. It may not be an eagle or a crown. It may be a castle, or it may be a regimental mascot, like a pony, or in the case of Welsh regiments, it's a goat. Dead
That's
serious.
cool.
But it's this is the tool of the drum major, and what it's used for is to signal the starts and stops. Mace going out at a 45-degree angle is to signal the end of a tune. That'll be the signal for the bass drummer to give the double beats. The mace going straight up is typically used to, like in Amazing Grace, we use it to signal the pipers starting up. Pointing it out to the sides is used for wheels, like left and right. Tail up would be a counter march. So we use this for almost everything. And when it's held, it's kind of awkward to sit at the table like this, but when it's held by the drum major, it's held in the left hand, and you'll notice that it's 2 hands over and 2 hands under. The reason for that is the drummer became the drum major, so it's held like a snare stick. And that's a holdover from the drummer's heritage, the drum major's heritage. So we'll put that back over there. And then there's other types of maces. I brought a couple more. If you just want to grab one of the other ones, we can talk about that. So maces can often be decorated with different types of badges or ornamentation. I don't know if that's going to show up well on the camera, but this is the band's mace. It's got the band's cap badge on the side of the head there. And it's also got the band's name and the date of incorporation. Again, this is a ceremonial mace. This particular one's made out of fiberglass versus Malacca cane, which is what the other maces are made out of. And it's also got the chain. And then there's one more.
Kevin has like 1 billion maces, by the way.
They have their own room. And this is an example of a ding. That's a worst sound ever for a drum major. Ding followed by clang is another one that's bad. But this is an example of a competition mace. And when I mentioned that it's made from Malacca cane, it's a really springy wood. And this is designed to be thrown. The fact that it's wobbly, and you can kind of see that it's got that wobble to it. When you're throwing a mace really high in the air and it's coming down, if it doesn't have that give, it's like trying to catch a baseball bat out of midair, and that really hurts and it sucks, right? So, but this has a little bit more comfort to it. It's also a lot lighter, but very similar to the other maces, with the exception of instead of having a chain, it's got cord because that's nicer on the hands, but it still provides some grip for the drum major.
So do you switch your maces out if you know you're going to be doing a lot of flourishing? So you say, okay, I'm going to bring this mace because it's easier to catch. That's cool.
Yeah, I wouldn't bring, like, for example, the brass one for ceremonial. I would not bring that to a competition. I have no intention of ever throwing that mace. It belonged to my teacher. And when he retired, Jim Thompson, when he retired, he gave that to me. I just can't imagine. I don't think about dropping the mace, but I don't want to find out. And so that one would never be thrown. It's also very heavy. But yeah, if I know that the performance is going to be really, really formal or really dressy, like if we're playing for a black tie dinner or something like that, I'm going to wear full dress as the drum major with the feather bonnet and the plaid and the horsehair sport and everything. I wouldn't typically use a mace that has cords on it because that doesn't match the attire. So I would use the mace that has chain and look very formal that way. So moving on with the show and tell session of today's
Talk about the elephant in the room.
This is really fun, by the way.
Okay, cool. Right on. I'm glad that we're
The ball
having
and
fun
chain
with...
thing was like a fun fact. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
In fact, this is really cool for us, like just to see, because we're tenor drummers. We don't think about like drum major maces and like just to be explained all the different parts. And I'm sure
And
a lot of
the
people,
grip too.
The grip,
that
yeah.
that was interesting.
And the cord that I use on that mace is very similar to the strings that we would use to tie tenor mallets together. And as you know yourselves, a different type of string can have a different feel on your hands. So you don't want to, for drum major maces, you don't want to use a cord that's too fat. You don't want to use a cord that has no grip whatsoever, or, because in Scotland, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be raining while we compete. So we need that extra grip. So you really want to make sure that it's functional for the job. So the elephant in the room, the stuff that I get made fun of for most often at band practice is the drum major's parade cane, which is very much a miniature mace. What it's used for, this was designed by the British Army to match the swagger stick that's carried by sergeant majors. Difference being, or a drill cane, excuse me. Swagger stick would be carried under their arm, but a drill cane is also used. So it's about the same size as a drill cane, and it's got the chain on it to represent the appointment of a drum major. And this particular cane is rosewood, which is a sturdier wood. It's something a little different, just kind of looks nice. This was given to me by the Caledonian Society of Arizona for 2 decades of being on the games committee. So it's kind of a nice gift from them. What this is used for is very similar to all the other signals and commands that a drum major would use. You probably wouldn't see me carrying this in a show. It's not really what it's used for, but it had 2 purposes. One was it was used to be carried in barracks in the military, and is still used today to be carried in barracks. So it's more of like an accessory. I use it at band practices because our practice hall has a very low ceiling. It also has Christmas lights that have not been removed for about 5 years. So when we're doing band practices and I'm giving the signals, a lot of times I'm getting the mace caught in those lights that are hanging down. So I started using this at band practice. But the other traditional use for this was to keep hands out of pockets. The British military had a big thing about soldiers walking around with their hands in their pockets, and the U.S. military has the same thing. You don't catch us wearing our uniforms and standing around, like this. So it was meant to give your hands something to do, and that's another traditional aspect of it. But I do carry this around at band practice. I use it to give our signals. Sometimes at certain events that are dressy, again, if I'm not playing, if we're not performing, I'll carry it with me. It's just part of my appointment, and to keep my hands out of my pockets. I'm guilty of that. Then I think the other thing that we brought today is an example of a drum major's sash. You'll see this as a prized part of any drum major's uniform. Whoever wants to hold it, that's fine. So you'll notice that a drum major sash goes across the body very much like a drummer's sling. And that is the origin of the drum major sash. It goes across. You can see that it's got the miniature drumsticks on here. Some people call them tuning sticks. I've never used these sticks to ever tune a drum ever in my life, so I don't know that I would call them that. But a drum major sash is meant to show some of the badges and heritage of a particular band or regiment. So in our case, this is Mesa Caledonian Pipe Band sash, and it's got, instead of a crown and the royal cipher for Queen Elizabeth II, it's got an eagle and shield for the United States. It's got our band's crest, established 1980. And in the case of our band, we decided to put some of our more memorable competition moments. And for example, playing at the Worlds in Glasgow, Stirling, we competed at Bridge of Allen, and we've played at Stirling Castle, North Berwick, which was another great time out for the band, Perth, that was another one. And then a long time ago, some 20 years ago, the band, the first time it ever left the country was to go to Ontario, and we competed there. And then also on this sash is the coat of arms that was granted to me by the Lord Lyon in Scotland. So that's just something nice that I like to have on there. But you can see drum majors wearing full dress at Highland Games or in the Tattoo, and you'll see all kinds of amazing artwork and emblazoned work being done there, embroidered work, excuse me.
That's really cool. I like that. Yeah, I know you brought some more that, once again, Kevin has a lot of really nice things.
If anything that can come from my drum majoring career in pipe bands is I should start my own amateur museum. That's all I can say.
You should. Just that room full of mesas, just make that a museum.
I have a room full of pipe band stuff. So, yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, we will have Kevin back on the next episode. By the way, if there's anything between these two episodes that he doesn't talk about that you want to hear from him, let us know. Kevin is a wealth of knowledge, as you can tell from the past episode we've done. So he could literally sit here all day and tell us all kinds of things. So let us know if you have questions for him. We'll bring him back on, I assume, if he's willing to come back.
I'll come back. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so let us know, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, everyone. If you enjoyed this show, then support us on Patreon for exclusive content, as well as the video of us recording this. We'll have special exercises we'll be writing, as well as tips and tricks with tenor drumming and other instruments to come. Subscribe to us on YouTube for some tenor tutorials and possibly other tutorials later on. And like us on Facebook at Podband Pipecast.